Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to thank you once again for taking the time to join us today for part 2 of 3 live webinar series on mobile testing in joint collaboration with our partner HP. Today's webinar is focused on HP UFT Mobile, shortcut to effective mobile testing. We will present an introduction to HP UFT Mobile and demo towards the end of my colleague's presentation. I am proud today to be joined by my colleague Matt Torkington, a technical pre-sales consultant from HP, and my colleague Peter Schrabe, our Global Alliances Director from Test House. As you can see from the agenda, Peter will do an introduction of Test House, and Matt will take over the second and the third on the list, and we will have a Q&A session towards the end of Matt's presentation. We will expect the presentation to last 30 to 40 minutes, plus a Q&A at the end. Before I pass you over to my colleague Peter, please feel free to type in your questions on your Q&A pod during the presentation, and hopefully we will answer most of them during our Q&A session. Also, a full screen option is at the top of your screen is available for you if you need this. This might be useful when Matt will start his demo. Now, without further delay, I'll now pass you over to my colleague Peter, who will introduce Test House. Peter?
Mel, thank you very much indeed. For those of you who've been on our joint webinars with HP before, you've seen this slide before, but it really is just to reinforce the fact that Test House and HP are strategic partners in this space and have been for some 10 years. In terms of our mobile story, the company was formed in 2000. And what we've seen since 2000 is mobile becoming more and more important to the point now where I was reading that mobile apps are now outnumbering traditional apps on a ratio of 4 to 1. So everything we used to do in our traditional IT risk mitigation model is now being transferred to the mobile sites. A couple of quick case studies for you. The main thrust of today's presentation will be the demo on UFT Mobile. But I just thought I'd show you a couple of case studies that we've undertaken recently. This was a major telecommunication company, and the challenges we faced with this was the personalized content and location-based services that they were looking for, the dependency on device types, the amazing amount of frequent updates to the application, and because of these changes, the high regression impact and where they were in the project. So what we did was we basically automated the key regression scripts to reduce the regression cycle time. Another major one in the public sector was very complicated, SOA-based. You can see what the constituent parts were. And again, the challenges there, I'm sure you've all come across these in your own life. And again, what we did here was automated the key user workflows for a number of different access modes. And this was for a combination of GUI and API automation. So basically, that's just a flavor of what we've done in the space already, just to give you a flavor of what we've done in the past. And I'd now like to hand it over to Matt, who will take over for the main part of the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Torkington. I'm a pre-sales consultant for HP, previously Mercury and Mercury Interactive. And I was quite fortunate that back in 2000 I was working with Nokia on their first instance of their web portal. So really when it comes through to mobile testing, I was lucky enough to be really there quite early on in this story. So it's changed massively, and that's one of the things that really I'm going to start off and just talk about how I think it's changed, and also build up to showing you how we can start to test in an automated fashion devices and across devices and more complex and more rich data that's coming through. So we talk about this history of mobile devices and mobile testing. It really does mimic what we saw in the web. It started off with quite static data. The first WAP portals, you were lucky to get a few lines of text being displayed on your very, very small, dumb device. And it was really very straightforward to text because it was all text, straightforward to test, as it was all text data. But now we're seeing much more in the way of rich content being delivered. We are seeing much more a different user experience. Different types of users, instead of just being the consumer sites that are using this technology, very much now being bought in-house, and enterprise, bring your own device is massive. At Hewlett-Packard, we have an expenses application being rolled out internally, and when you think there's over 300,000 employees within the company, and a large number of those will be eventually using this expenses application, you can start to see the scale and the challenges that this new technology is really bringing and shaking things up. So we've all seen this. Mobile applications are disrupting everything. They're challenging how we work, they're challenging how we live, and they're challenging organizations to be quicker, deliver a much better user experience, and to make everything relevant, everything personal, and doing it much quicker. And this velocity that is coming from mobile is huge, and it's something that if you're thinking about a mobile app and you want to get it out the door, you need to be quick. Time to market in mobile has always been critical. It was critical when you started to launch the first devices. So the handset manufacturers used to judge themselves by how quickly they could get a device from conception through to release. Now it's about the devices, the operating systems, and the apps, and it's a race to get this out there. And if you're quicker, and if your application is slightly better than the competition, you're going to win that, and you're going to win a lot of revenue. But where does this go wrong? Well, the user interaction with mobile is the end game. Now, there is no reason that all of these screenshots I've put up here are from an Apple. It's not an anti-Apple thing. It's just happened to work this way. But when users go in and they're getting service unavailable, request timeout, errors, problems, transactions not available, what tends to happen is this. They go into the Play Store, they go into the App Store, they mark it down, they put very negative comments on there. And there was a study recently of, well, what percentage of people would install an app that only had 1 star? And I think it was 82% of people wouldn't try it or wouldn't reinstall it after they'd had a bad experience. So if you get it wrong at the beginning, that's it. You only really get one chance at all of this. So I'm going to skip over sort of these slides very quickly. They're here really more for information. There's some great stats on here. 64% of people's time is spent on apps. Now, what are they doing? Is it just they playing Candy Crush and Angry Birds? Well, a lot of it is, but also there's a lot of stuff going on there with the likes of online banking applications, going onto eBay, going onto Amazon, purchasing things all of the time. Most companies out there are increasing their budget. So if you're putting this big investment into your applications, you've got to make sure they work correctly. And I'm going to keep coming back to this pressure that's building on quality within the application space all of the time. So let's just move on from there. So the mobile life cycle. So once you've actually, I mean, it's a very busy slide, this, and there's a lot of information on here. But it falls into 4 areas. It's design, the build, the optimize, the push it out there, but then make sure that it works and it does the job. So there's a lot more emphasis on agile techniques, on quick design, quick implementation, quick delivery, and collaborating throughout the organization, from the developers and the testers all the way through to the operational team, and then getting the feedback into the business as well. So it's all about speed. And this is a survey that was done as part of the World Quality Report. This was a couple of years old. They've just released the 2013 report, and I don't haven't updated the number. But what stands in the way of effective mobile applications for organizations? Number one, we don't have the right test tools, don't have the devices, don't have the process and the method to do it, and we don't have the expertise to do the job. So the top 4 are all about test. Then we come down to environment, and then we come down to the time as well. So the top 6 now are test-related issues about pushing things out there. So HP, we've got a whole suite that covers the whole of this area. I'm actually going to focus today on the HP Unified Functional Testing for Mobile, UFT Mobile, and I'm going to talk through that in a lot more detail. So where do we test from? There is a perception with mobile testing that you need the devices in-house. When you are testing your application. You're not testing the whole end-to-end environment. What we need to be able to do is we need to be able to not just test what the experience will be from inside our environment, but we need to be able to test what the whole user experience is going to be. And this user experience is really important because it includes the 3G, the 4G network. It includes I'm running this on a tablet, I'm running this on a mobile phone. The device that people are coming in is also important. And it's also, as data centers get distributed around the world, it's making sure we're capturing all of the moving parts as well. So what we're looking to do with UFT Mobile is find a way of being able to test your application pretty much from anywhere over real mobile phone networks and push the information so you get valid and real results back when you publish. And these real-world network conditions are important. So do you get lots of jitter, lots of bandwidth, any packet loss? Is there much latency there? Because your application might be perfect, but if you're running from an area where there is very poor signal or if there is very poor 3G provisioning, so for example, I live in North Wales, sometimes I get a flying signal and other times my mobile experience is awful. So what I've noticed is on good days, I get a great experience. On bad days, my experience is absolutely awful. And this is what your customers will be thinking as well. So the first time they try and log into one of your systems, what they will do is they will go in, and if it just happens to be a bad day, your application might be fantastic, but because of their mobile network provider, you are going to get a bad reputation. And that's not fair, for want of a better way of putting it, but that's reality. So we need to be able to take this into account. So if we have a look at why I'm talking about this, this is an example of some stats that we've gathered. Typical applications, and there's 3 different types of response time monitored here. If I'm just testing over my local area network, that's the blue columns. I get really good performance from all of my various transactions within the application. But when I move through the WAN and then go to 3G, what I can see is my performance is falling apart. So the search function is 4 seconds on a local area network. That's pretty good. But on a WAN or even over my 3G, I'm actually finding that the performance goes to 25 to 35 seconds. That's appalling. And people aren't going to sit around and wait for that amount of time for these to come back. They're going to move on to something else. So this is what we need to be able to think about when it comes to testing and put all of this together. Sorry. So what are we talking about today? The main focus of today is UFT Mobile. And UFT is called Unified Functional Testing. It is a progression of a tool that started out life as XRunner, then became WinRunner, then Quick Test Professional, and is finally called Unified Functional Testing. This is its latest form. And it's there to give us the ability to automate functional and API tests so that we can do them in a repeatable fashion and we can manage quick responses in terms of testing. So instead of us having to go and do lots of repeating manual tests, we can automate it, script it, and run it multiple times overnight on demand and get quick results back and just focus on where the problem areas. The mobile element of this is an add-in that we have to this service, and it consists of 2 parts. The first is an add-in to UFT Mobile itself, the mobile plugin. And this is what's giving us the functionality to be able to drive real devices. The second part of the mobile solution is a cloud-based devices available to us. Now these can be private cloud, where they're out on the cloud but they're dedicated to your organization. public cloud, where they are devices out on the cloud where many organizations can use the same devices, or they can be dedicated and on-premise devices as well. So these are the physical devices that you wish to test against. So what's good about this and what's good about this service? Well, first of all, you've got full control over the device you're working against. You don't need to go in there and jailbreak it and put in lots of extra stuff that most users won't have on their phones at home. There is no hardwiring that you need to worry about. These devices, they live in cradles, either on the cloud or on your premise, and if you want to use and test a different device, we can just go in there and we can plug in a new device for you, or if it's on-premise, you can go in and plug in a new device, and it's up and ready for you to run straight away. So it's a very straightforward, very easy to use service. So this is an explanation of the screenshot. I'm actually leaving this in there if these slides are available afterwards, just so what I'm going to show in a second in the demo is going to be easier for you to see. So there are 3 levels of device provisioning we can give you. The private cloud. This is, as I've mentioned, a dedicated pool of devices available to you on the cloud that are managed and maintained by ourselves. So you can choose how many devices, which devices you have. If you want to swap them out, they're swapped out as a service, and that becomes available. The second is Mobile Cloud Express. This is your own devices on your premise, and you get a server from ourselves, and you can plug your devices in, and it's the same technology, but it's just local for yourselves. And what's quite nice about this is I've been speaking to some companies recently where what they're wanting to do is, because they're on the network side, is be able to test their own RF networks. So they need to be able to turn around, set up devices, switch devices over cells when they're doing streaming media, for example, and test what the application availability is like. And the third one is a public cloud. The public cloud has got thousands of devices out there. It's a shared pool of devices that people sign up to use. And when you lock a device, it is yours to use for that session. But when you stopped using it, it becomes available to anyone else that has signed up the service. So this is a shared service. So the way I tend to look at it is the private cloud is for the larger organizations who want to do the testing for themselves. Mobile Cloud Express is for people who don't particularly have a cloud, public cloud or private cloud solution at the moment, don't trust it, don't want to use it, want things in-house, or as I've mentioned before, organizations that need to do specific mobile testing, so RF testing, etc., in-house. And the public cloud is typically aimed at those smaller organizations that need to do this, but don't necessarily have the budget or want the expense of setting up their own dedicated service. So back to UFT Mobile itself, once we actually go into the tool. The whole idea here is by using these devices available on the cloud, wherever that cloud is located, we are testing across devices, we are testing real devices, and we've tried to make it intuitive as possible so you can just pick up and use the system. And here's the key point. When we started off automating mobile tests, everybody used emulators. It was very rare to find an automated test that would actually run against a real phone. That probably only started coming in about 2004, 2005 that people started doing that for real. And the reason you don't use emulators for this is, whilst they're cost effective, whilst they're easy to provide to people to test against, you don't have the limitations and any of the oddities that you would see on a specific device. You don't get any of the network interaction. There's no Bluetooth, there's no SIM card, there's no RF traffic going back and forth, and there is no guarantee that the code set you're using on an individual emulator is anywhere like the code set that you're running on the device. So there's lots of differences there. There's lots of component parts. If you look at the OS stack on a device these days, it's probably about 100, 200 different items of software. I was speaking to a friend of mine who works for BlackBerry. He said the last BlackBerry phone that shipped they sent it off to the network providers with 800 separate software components on that device. Now, you're not going to get that through an emulator, so the only real way to get real information about how well your app works on a device is to test it on that device. So, utilising the cloud, it's great, it really is good. Let's have a look at how modern organisations do their development and their testing at the moment. You might have developers in the UK, India, China, all working together, testers in the same locations all working together, and devices available out there somewhere that people can use and people can share and people can work with. And these are the latest devices. There is the ability just to click a few buttons and get one of those devices provisioned for you, which means there's less wait time, there's less contention on all of this. And people, for developers over in the UK and a tester in India has discovered an issue, it's very, very easy then for them both to hook up to the device on the cloud and see exactly what's going on. So collaboration is also a lot easier in this scenario. So what I'm going to do now is I have it's actually a video of a demo, and the reason I'm using a video is it's actually much easier to see all of the various elements of what's going on. I have some call-outs in there. What you are seeing, though, is a live recording of an application, and as it plays through, I will actually turn around and talk you through it as we run. So let's just try and share this. Hopefully now you can all see a screen that says HP UFT Mobile, and that has displayed correctly. So I'm going to hit play. So what I have here is I've got unified functional testing running on a desktop machine, and I'm going to log in. And every time you log into UFT, as I said, it works for multiple technologies, so web browsers, CRM, ERP systems, etc. I'm going to select the add-in for UFT Mobile, and it's going to go away, it's going to connect to the test management tool, and it's going to log into UFT, which is done here. And immediately on the right-hand side, you can see it's creating a connection through to the cloud where my mobile devices are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away, I'm going to select some devices that I want to generate some tests on. And in this case, the first one I'm going to go for is a Samsung Galaxy, and I put this in, load it up, and it's available for me. And these are real devices. So these are real devices with real phone numbers. So what I'm actually able to do is I can test a lot of the basic functionality of the phone, not just the apps. So here it's sending and receiving text messages. I can send messages between various phones that are living in the cradle. So that's one example of how I can use it. I can also set this up for cross-device testing as well. So now I've opened up a Samsung. I'm going to open up the iPhone 4, and I'm going to do some work on here as well. So now I have my devices. They're both provisioned. Now, these devices are living over in a cradle somewhere on the cloud. In this case, it's actually an HP demo lab based in London. Now, what I am seeing on my screen on the right-hand side is the exact screen that is on the phone at the moment. So if I was to go and take these phones out of the cradles, I would see exactly the same view as I'm seeing here within UFT. So everything is replicated and everything is accurate. These are real devices that are plugged in, and all I'm seeing is a screen. So I'm going to generate a test. And the test I'm going to do is actually going to be just going away to the BBC weather website and checking to find out if it's going to rain in my locality in the near future. So we're going to generate a test, and I've got some tools to make this a bit easier. Now, what I'm going to do for this example, what I did for this example, I should say, as it's a recorded demo, is instead of just recording on the device, because it's quite possible for me in this scenario to go away, click on record, and actually press all the buttons on the device directly. But what I want is a test that I can replay on either my Android or my iOS device and get that set up and running quite easily. So I'm going to use this function menu to do the work. And the function menu gives me lots of very useful options, not just what I can see from the front end, but also other ones. So if I have my own application I want to install, I can install it, uninstall it, start up the application on a device. So this is back-end administrative tasks as well. What I'm then going to do is I can reboot the device, I can do all sorts of work on the physical device as well, should I need to. So as I work through here, I'm going to start to capture my test on iOS. So this is where I'm going to start off the work. And as I do this, my functional screen actually gives me some help. So by clicking the home button on there, it will make sure I go to the home button on the iOS device. As I come through here now, I'm going to go and say I want to do some work on the browser, and I want the browser to go to a particular website. So I'm just going to go in here and type in the URL. Now, as though this looks like a more complicated way of doing the tests, I actually quite like it. And the reason I like it is twofold. First of all, it's easier to generate this as a cross-device test. Secondly, if someone comes in on my phone and reorders all of the icons, I don't have to worry about if I'm on the right screen or go away and find the icon and to make sure it's displayed before I click on it. It just makes it easier for me to maintain and manage my tests. And also, if we look on the screen at the moment where it says device ID, that value there is what I'm going to use later on to actually port this test over to other devices. And also I find it's easier just to type things on the keyboard than use the device keyboard as well, but that's a personal preference. So here we go. I've gone onto my device, I've gone to the BBC Weather website and it's loading up. And this is actually running on the EE network, if you see in the top left-hand corner. And I have a 3G connection on the device, so I'm testing this over a real network. What I'm now going to do is say, I want to interact with an item. So I'm going in here and I'm saying, right, what do I want to do? Well, there's something here that's find a forecast. I need to enter some text. So it's enter a UK town is where the text is said in the edit box. And I'm going to go in there and put a value of Woburn Sands. So this was where we were when the script was actually recorded. I also see the snapshot of where it thinks it's going to enter the text in the bottom left-hand corner of that box. And that means that the text is going to go in and be put there. And everything I'm doing on the right-hand side at the moment, you can see is being replicated on the device, and on the left-hand side is being generated as a script. I can also go in here and define what the buttons are. So in this case, the button is actually a picture of a magnifying glass. So I'm going to go in and say that magnifying glass is something that I need to interact with. So someone might have generated something new, something I've not seen before. I can define it as an object within UFT so that I can reuse it over and over again. Once that's done, and I know that everything's going to go on, I want to put a checkpoint. In this case, if it's going to rain, what I want to see is I want to see the rain image. I want it to be able to see that it's going to come back and say, yes, there's going to be showers in my locality on this result. So what I'm doing is I've created a very simple script here. Go to a website by opening up the browser, search for a town. Once I've searched for that town, let me know if it's going to rain or not. So I've generated that on an iOS device with the iOS information. So now what I'm going to do is this device ID that's important. You can see it's for the Android one, it's actually quite a horrible string. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to copy it and use it as an input directly into my test to tell it which one I want to run on. So all I have to do is when I hit to run to replay the test is go in here, change the device ID, and click Run. And what we will now see is this test that I've generated on an Apple device replaying successfully on my Samsung Android. And it's going through, goes to the home page, which is pressing a different button in this case to get to the home page, opening up the browser and going to the BBC weather site. Once it's got to this weather site, I'm searching for a certain location, putting in my search Woburn Sands and hitting the search button which I defined earlier. Same search button because it's the same website even though it's a different device. And here again, I can see that it's come through and the image has actually displayed. So the image I'm looking for is being displayed for me. But I can verify all of this because everything I do, once I've run a test, is captured for me. So I can come back and review it later. So this means if I have a selection of 100, 200 automated tests that I want to run overnight that live in my regression test pack, all I have to do is come back to this report the next morning, and any failures will be displayed for me with a big red cross next to them. So out of my 100 test cases, I can just go straight to the 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, that have failed and take remedial action there. Because what I can see is I can see exactly what's happened, and I can see what has failed and why it has failed. And that's a really important distinction. Moving on from here, obviously having lots of hard-coded data isn't much use to me. So it is possible to parameterize everything that I'm doing. So now instead of searching for Woburn Sands, I'm actually going to go here and do a postcode search against the site. And one of the nice things about UFT that I really have appreciated in the sort of the 14 years I've been using these products is when you add additional rows of data and you parameterize something, it automatically runs round for every row of data. So you don't have to go and set it up or write complicated scripting around it just to get it to use the data. It will do all of that work for you. So you can put a lot of data sets in there with minimal effort. So here we're going through on the first iteration. We can see Woburn Sands has been selected, and it's gone, it's done its search. And now if we have a look, we're going to go away, do the checkpoint, and automatically start on the second one. So we go back to the home page. Once we've got to the home page, back into the BBC Weather website in a second. So I got slightly ahead of myself. And this time, instead of putting that town name, I'm putting in a postcode and doing a search for that postcode as well. So without any scripting, any complicated scripting, the simple functions that I as a user just want are there for me already. I don't have to do anything else. So that goes through. Obviously, once we've completed it, we can go back into the results, and we will see, if you look on the left-hand side, you can see iteration 1, row 1, iteration 2, row 2. This is giving me an individual result for every single row of data. And as I come through here, what I'll be able to see is which town was being used, have I met my checkpoint, is everything okay? So really, with a minor amount of work in this demo, I've created a cross-browser test that will go away, and I can just add more data to it now to go through and very simply just check if the weather's coming back. I could put lots of different checkpoints in there. I could just check for text. I could look for a specific error code, for example, and I could work from there. And every time we finish with the devices, we close them off within UFT, and once they've closed off within UFT, they've actually been returned to the pool within the cloud. So they're then able to be used by other users again, should they need to be. So that's the very quick UFT demonstration. So I've just got a few more slides that I just want to run through now, and once we go through these final slides, we're opening up for more Q&A. And what I would say is all of you have the ability to ask any questions through the Q&A screen. I see there's a couple up there already, so please feel free to put any questions either to Peter or to myself. So using automation for tests such as these, is there a real benefit there? So we did some work with a television broadcaster, quite a large one, and if we started to look at doing testing manually, so 10 manual scripts on Android mobile to kickstart the thing, we were noticing there was about 19 man-days worth of effort to get this testing set up and running. So we did some work with them. We tried to understand, by making this more repeatable, by having the devices available, how quickly could we get a payback, a return of investment on this just for their regression testing based on 10 scripts. And we discovered we could do that within 13 days. Break-even point was in 13 days. So they could go from a regression test pack and within 13 days start saving themselves money. Now, if you multiply that by the number of iterations of the regression tests that they would have to do and the number of times they would have to set up their own devices, manage their own devices, check that the devices hadn't changed and the scripts were still valid, you can start to understand how quickly and how much they will be able to save just in time in terms of that. So that's all I've got to say on UFT Mobile at the moment. So I think now we're going to be opening up for questions. And Mel, are you going to be asking the questions, or do you just want me to read them out?
I'll try and manage the Q&A, Matt, if that's okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt, and also Peter for your excellent presentation this afternoon. As Matt mentioned, we are now taking questions. So if you do have any particular question to either Peter or Matt, or to the demo, especially to the demo that Matt just recently completed, if you could, please type in your questions, and we will hopefully answer them for you. So let me start on I've got a few questions as Matt mentioned earlier, so let me start on one or two of this, and then please do type your questions in. First question is, what considerations should be uppermost in our minds when considering cloud versus on-site offering? Matt?
Okay, so I mentioned some of this in the slides earlier. The big reason for cloud versus on-site, there's typically a few. I've spoken to a lot of organizations where, strangely enough, it's the chief finance officer has turned around and said the cloud is not allowed. So if there's a corporate policy at your organization that doesn't allow the cloud, that's going to be obviously a big deciding factor. The other one we typically see is, as I said, some organizations want to maintain control of this themselves anyway and manage this. Now, this could be because they're doing things like private cell testing, so they're testing within a radio frequency test bed. So that's a logical situation where it's got to be on site. But I think those are probably the two. It's corporate considerations, or there's a specialist amount of testing, which means that cloud is just not an option for you. But each case seems to be fairly unique. Both ourselves and HP and Test House obviously very happy to talk and find out what the best solution for individuals would be.
Great, thank you, Matt. Another question for you. If we are testing on the cloud, as the first question was, then security is a major issue. How secure is this software or application? Matt?
Okay, in terms of security, I mean, one of the things that happens is if you're testing on the public cloud. So remember, we've got the three offerings. We've got the public cloud, which is shared devices, a private cloud, which are devices out on the cloud, but they are dedicated to your organization. And then also we've got devices that could be on-site. So obviously on-site, inside your corporate environment, security is generally not an issue. On the private cloud, these machines are ring-fenced. No one else can access them apart from yourselves. No one else can use them. We have banks that are using this solution. We have government organizations that are using this solution worldwide as well. So in terms of security, we've passed many security audits, and we're not concerned about that. On the public cloud, obviously the security one is a little bit more interesting. But generally speaking, what happens is as you assign that device to use in one of your tests, that device is locked down to you. So generally, these machines get cleaned up on a regular basis, so you don't have other people's applications on there or anything like this. It's just it's a public device, though. You go onto this device. It is secure to use it. No one else can get on there as you're using it. And my personal view, and I tend to do this in all of my testing, as I have for the last 15, 16 years or so, is we go onto there, and at the end of the test, I make sure I do a wipe of my data and I do a wipe of everything else. And that way, the communication's secure, but I know that anyone coming after me can't find anything that I've left on that device. So it's a common sense approach there.
Great, thank you, Matt. Another question for you. Can we run the same device simultaneously for multiple devices?
Not from a single instance of UFT, no. So if you wanted to run on multiple devices all at the same time, you would require additional instances of UFT. But the test that you record on one instance is very easily portable over to other instances of UFT. But the playback and the record, you tend to record or play back at one device at a time.
Great, thank you, Matt. Another one for you. How accurate are the emulators, cloud-based, versus the real device? We've found in the past that testing on emulators do not always show the same issues when testing on a physical device.
Yeah, all of the devices here are real devices. What you see within, if I go back to the screenshot in UFT, what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the UFT screen here are images of a real device that are in a cradle somewhere on the cloud or on site. So we only work with real devices. There's no emulators involved here at all. And the reason we don't have emulators, I think I did have a quick slide on it earlier, it's exactly your point. I think it was Vikal that raised the question. It was exactly your point, Vikal. We can't guarantee that they're going to be accurate, that the code base is accurate, and the user experience is going to be accurate as well. So we tend to avoid it. And unfortunately, I can't find the slides, so I'm not going to go through.
I think going through that question, how many real devices can be connected? Maybe maximum. I think the question is about how the maximum number of real devices that can connect to UFT Mobile. Matt?
Okay, in the cloud, I don't think we really have a limit in the cloud about how many devices can be made available to you. I think there's a practical limit when using UFT. You don't want to have too many there because your screen would because you can only record or run on one at a time. Having when I opened up 2 devices there, it was more for demo purposes of showing you the cross device element. You wouldn't really want lots open because you'll get very confused very quickly about what's happening. Remember, you are running, it's a one-to-one relationship between UFT effectively and the device when you're executing the tests. And so you can have as many UFTs running against devices you have in the cloud, and there's no real limit to the number of devices that you sign up for in the cloud.
Great, thank you, Matt. If you do have any other questions, we will wrap up the Q&A session now. Again, if you do have any other questions, please do type them on your Q&A pod, and we will take some of this offline for you. Before we go, the recording will be available within the next couple of days. Any further questions, as I mentioned, regarding UFT Mobile, do drop me or Peter a line, and we'll forward some of your technical questions to Matt. No problem at all. We will have our next webinar session will be on mobile security testing using HP Fortify on demand. We're thinking that would be sometime beginning of January, so please do watch out for that. Before we go, Matt, Peter, do you want to say anything before we complete the webinar?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Matt. I think that was very comprehensive, and I'm sure the attendees all appreciated it.
Perfect. Thank you guys very much for joining us this afternoon, and hope to see you again. Thank you.